All right, well, welcome to the August version of the Agones community meeting, everyone. Thanks for being here. Mark's dancing for us. It looks like on the agenda, Mark, you've got the first three items, something about upgrading to Kubernetes 1.16. I think that's a thing. You want to talk about that?
I got there first. I think it's basically it. Mostly, we've started, I think is the number one thing. So the end-to-end cluster is now running 1.16. It seems like things are passing, so good. I've ticked off some of the items in that list that have been completed. I think that's up to date. I'm just having a quick look here. There's still a bunch of stuff still to do, but one cool thing that actually came out of that is since we, all the dev tooling, we now got rid of deployment manager, which is super cool. Everything is running all the same Terraform scripts all the way through, which is kind of nice. So we get a lot more usage of Terraform and like if we find bugs. And so I actually found a bug in the process, which was nice and fixed it, which was good. So it's all using exactly the same stuff. So actually even doing this upgrade was a much smaller footprint. I could essentially change the GKE Terraform versioning there and it funneled its way through to everything else, which was awesome. So yeah, if people want to help, that is great. I think a lot of it outside of client Go, it's mostly documentation fixes.
Yeah, I'm happy to help drive that as well. I put some notes on the issue when we opened it sort of around a previous meeting, just to let people know that API changes, like bigger ones started happening in 1.16. And so I think the only API there was only like maybe one API that affected us that got dropped, which are some of the beta APIs got dropped. But there are a bunch of APIs that also went GA. And so we need to figure out when we start moving stuff up to GA APIs, because those APIs, the beta versions will get dropped in a future release of Kubernetes. And I know that we officially only support one version, but some people try to install stuff on slightly newer or slightly older versions. And we should be cognizant of when we start relying or removing support for specific API versions. So.
I'm gonna say, didn't you do this already?
Yeah, I just wanted to give people a heads up and a reminder that
okay.
I stuck a note in the issue, so people can check that if they
oh yeah, I see you changed some of the scheduling stuff and some of the API server stuff. I think that was it.
Yeah,
it wasn't a huge amount.
Yeah, that was the only thing we had to do for this release, but a bunch of stuff graduated to GA, and so maybe when we go to 1.17, or maybe we should do it now, we should be moving stuff from V1 beta APIs to V1 APIs.
I think,
and there were a bunch of places in the code, I think, that we need to change for that, not just in the YAML files.
Oh, okay, I thought you'd done it actually. Maybe I was wrong.
No, I just did so one note. So beta APIs are no longer served in 1.16. So like the scheduling beta API is no longer served. And so we moved stuff to scheduling V1. But like CRDs went to GA in 1.16. So we're still using all the beta APIs for CRDs. And apparently there were a couple of little changes between beta and GA. So we want to switch to the GA version. That will mean that people will not be able to install and run Agones on versions older than 1.16, right? Because the V1 API won't be served on the low version. So we don't necessarily want to do it now, but this is when it was part of the Kubernetes release note. So if we forget about it, we're not going to remember until 1.19 when they completely drop support for the old ones, right? So we want to kind of do it somewhere in the middle. So we should probably do it maybe like around the 1.17 time. So we like nominally support 1.16 and 1.17, and don't completely abandon people who still need to run 1.15 at this point. I just wanted to kind of give people a heads up that there's a little bit of churn there. We often talk about like supported versions and that we support a version, but people try to install stuff and it generally works on other versions. And this is a case where we know that things would break on other versions.
That makes sense.
Just to make a notice about this bug, which is related to Helm plus GKE. If we update recreated cluster GKE cluster, we currently there is no way in Terraform to update else to Helm install the new release or reinstall Agones. So probably we need to have additional step just to make sure all is fine. I mean, after changing the version.
I'm not sure I understood this actually.
Well, I have added recently some comments about from Helm or Terraform issues, which this closely relates to, and if we have two models, one dependent on another, Terraform would not create a dependency, say child, which is Helm, after we create a parent, which is GKE, so it would not recreate the child after this.
So just so I understand, like, what's the flow that breaks from like a user point of view? Like, am I upgrading like Agones versions through Terraform? Is that what you're saying, or something else?
It would not recreate Agones here if a GKE cluster would be recreated. So please take care of it. I mean, there was some comment about this, why Terraform doesn't do this in multiple model structure when one depends on another. So when I used new Terraform 0.13 depend on for modules, it also doesn't help.
So I'm sorry, I'm still not understanding what the actual like bug is.
Say when you just rename the cluster from test cluster to test cluster number 2, and say you have test cluster plus Agones on it, and when you have test cluster number 2, you don't have any Agones. When you just Terraform apply with a new name, say. Just by nature of Terraform, yeah.
Yeah, I think, are we great? Go ahead.
I think I understand what he's trying to say. If you basically, Alexander, if I understood correctly, if you rename the cluster and you create a new one, the workflow to deploy Agones is not going to work, right? With Terraform 0.13.
I mean, if you just have Terraform apply first time, it would create all what you need, and if you just to create, say, Terraform apply with a different name of the cluster, it would just create a cluster for you, and you can make Terraform plan to see what resources it would update, and it would update only cluster, and all resources for GCP, and no Agones inside. So
yeah, did you get it, Mark?
Okay.
So if you rename the cluster, GKE, the GKE Terraform resources will recreate the cluster, and for what I understand, it's not going to deploy Agones, basically. If you already have a cluster running with Agones in Terraform, and you rename the cluster, which will recreate it, it's not going to deploy Agones again.
Yeah, with Terraform apply, when you do two times Terraform apply, one with previous configuration, one with new.
Yeah, I think the problem. Yeah, the problem lies in how Terraform handles state with GKE cluster rename. Basically, I think it's a very specific issue.
And the same with the new version of Kubernetes could be the case, but I have not tested it. Yeah, let's add the comment here, not to forget. Yeah, just Terraform test with new version of Kubernetes.
Is there a Terraform bug for this?
Yeah, I have a comment inside. Comment in Terraform HashiCorp. Well, let's. I will add inside our meeting docs if I found more details.
Got it. Cool. Thanks for explaining.
Yes.
Dominic, you added a question here that I think you may want to say out loud so that we understand it.
Yeah, so my question wasn't, I don't think it was particular to this bug, but the question was, in Terraform, can Terraform create CRDs for us yet with the Kubernetes provider? Because in that case, if you're doing it with Terraform, you can just do full Terraform and bypass Helm.
They're redoing their Kubernetes stuff, but I can't remember the details.
Because I mean, personally, I would like CRDs because the way I logically think about stuff is like the bootstrapping of the cluster and installing CRDs is part of the bootstrapping to the cluster for me, which is all done in Terraform. Then everything after that, which is the applications in the cluster, is spun up using Customize. So I always separate into Bootstrap and Terraform and then Customize. At the minute, the CRD is in weird middle state, at least with my workflow.
Does Terraform support CRDs? I have a blog post for you.
Nice.
Google foo. I knew they'd updated their stuff.
Ah, nice. So it does now. Fantastic. Cool. I'll have a read of that after the meeting offline. And see
Oh, they have a built-in function now for YAML decode for converting YAML to HCL. Fancy. Anyway, yeah, let us know how that goes. Actually, we're kind of curious.
Fancy or terrifying? I don't know what to think about it. It could be either both, you know.
It's a choice.
It's a choice. Yeah, it depends how you look at it.
I'll tick that off. I'll write a note. Dominic to investigate and find out how well it works. Sweet. Oh, there's lots of stuff coming in now. Excellent. I just wanted to bring it up in case people hadn't seen it or wanted to add to it. A conversation that happened in Slack that ended up in a ticket around what's the prerequisite knowledge for getting started with Agones and dedicated game servers, which I think is actually a really good, nice piece of scalable like explanation type stuff. We're getting a bunch of people who are into the project who necessarily may not know anything about dedicated game servers or know anything about Kubernetes. And so having a good understanding of what level of knowledge in both areas are required before getting involved with this project or trying to get started with it, I think is super useful, because seeing some people who are like, I don't know anything about Kubernetes, but I'm going to learn Agones and Kubernetes and Docker and all the things all at once, which is just genuinely an impossible task. So if you get a chance to have a look, I think there's some great resources in there. If there's anything else you want to add, please feel free. I think we have a pretty good thing. We just need to write it, and I'll probably end up doing it unless somebody jumps on it first.
You're saying there are a bunch of things written up where? You mean in Slack or?
So I've got a link to the ticket in the meeting notes.
Oh, in the ticket. Okay.
Yeah, there's a bunch of stuff. So I outlined what I thought would be the most pertinent concepts for Docker and Kubernetes. People seem to be like, that's a good thing. Then asked also what resources people liked. People pointed to the getting started experience, as well as apparently everyone loves Katacoda, which is awesome. And I think it was Dom actually who also pointed out that yes, people should know about dedicated game servers. And I was like, that makes a lot of sense. Actually, I didn't think about it that way. I'm silly. Probably need some good resources for that. I did a silly video about it. If other people have other thoughts on that, it's on like how to find a good example of how to explain that. That would also be handy. But there's some good stuff in there. So if people have other thoughts, this is especially true if you are actually a beginner and you want to help in this area. It is very hard to go back to being a beginner once someone has been doing stuff for a long time. So that is useful knowledge to have. So if there's a path you took, please explain.
Yeah, it feels like in our sort of getting started, we need like a getting started from complete scratch versus getting like, here are the sections you should skip forward. Like if you already understand Kubernetes, like skip past this. If you already understand what a dedicated game server is, skip past this. But like the basic flow should probably have more information linking out to like the resources for people to get up to speed on those things.
Yeah.
I think the ones I see in the ticket look really good.
Yeah. I was thinking about adding like a prerequisite knowledge that sits above overview or something like that, and sort of have that as a first step, and we can play with it. That was my theory anyway.
I think possibly that could also go in each of the SDKs. So like the SDK could specifically say, if you're new to Unity or Unreal, go and check out these resources.
Oh, nice. I like that.
Because I know there's a lot of people who try Unreal and it's a beast. And there's so much to learn. Yeah. So yeah, it could be good to have it in context.
I like it.
Yeah, that's especially true. Like when I was trying to update the SDKs to the game engines, it's really difficult to figure out like how do you build and put this thing in a container and like test stuff and get it on Agones or Kubernetes at all, right? So like I was certainly struggling with that. Like it's easy for me to get like the simple UDP one up and running, right? But like yeah, if we have links to help people with like the specific engine that they're going to be using, I think that'd be really awesome.
That's a really good point. I like that. Actually, I write that in the ticket to Dom's point.
I think to play devil's advocate to your proposal, Mark, I think I wouldn't put something above the overview because I'd worry that people would skip that. And the overview kind of says like, we do dedicated game servers on Kubernetes. It links to both those things and gives like a background of like what the project is and why we do it. And it feels like what's next should be like, as you get started, like then you sort of talk about the prerequisites. Like it should be after overview before installation, probably.
I like that.
And an overview should jump you to prerequisites, and we can tell people to skip that step if they already feel like they're up to speed.
Yeah, it's much easier for someone to self-select themselves out of a prerequisite and move forward quickly than it is. Then yeah, no, I like that. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and the flow should be start off with like what we do, why you're here, and then like when you're getting started, here's what you should know ahead of time.
Yeah. Notes to the ticket so that I remember that as well. Cool. I think that was. Oh no! Apparently, I'm next as well. Oh my god! I have all the things apparently.
Kind of thought these tied together, maybe. So.
Yeah, this is something that comes up. This I keep asking people. It comes up in Slack a lot. Like the common. So this is having a solutions template or a solutions section on the website. So the thing that comes up on a regular basis is usually how do I do WebSockets with Agones? It probably comes up once every 3 to 6 months. And there's a few different ways that people can do it. And what I usually say at that point is people go off. We have an issue ticket that sort of describes some solutions and some history that describes some solutions. But I sort of go to like, it would be great if someone was like, this is my opinionated way of solving X, right? Like WebSockets, something else. And so I was thinking it would be maybe, it doesn't seem like anyone has taken me up on the invitation to write a solution, which made me wonder like, should we write a solution section and just put it there? Should we write a solution section and maybe have a solutions template to sort of like help people along? Does this sound like a good idea? I don't know. I'm sort of just floating it. It seems like I'm just looking for ways to scale out helping people.
Is this more of like an example usages?
Yeah, it's like I have an opinionated way of solving this problem with Agones. It's not necessarily generic. It's just, this is how we did it.
It's a recipe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that
the only reason why
I'm curious? Go ahead, Dom.
The only reason why I ask is like, to me, the whole WebSockets plus Kubernetes thing, I didn't quite know how they meet. Why was it a Kubernetes issue, not just how do WebSockets work in containers?
Oh, no, usually actually more than anything else, it's to do WebSockets, you need to have a domain name because you need to have an HTTPS cert. And then like, how do you manage domain name?
Did Mark freeze for everyone or just me?
Yeah, everyone.
Oh, I thought it was on
gone.
my end.
Interesting. Yeah.
Or it's an epic troll.
So that's yeah. For some reason, I was thinking WebSockets within the cluster because I've done that before. I wasn't really thinking about outside the cluster, but yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah, like your game client running in a web browser, reaching back to your game backends. I think is the use case people often bring up.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a combination of like frequently asked questions and examples, I guess. Yes, you did.
Yep.
You're back now, though.
I'm back. Ah, I did it again. Okay, I know what the problem is.
So Mark, I was going to ask, I think there are sort of two ways I've seen this done in the past. One is, oftentimes when people build a solution that they want to write a blog post on their company blog or somewhere else that we had linked to, right? So if company X does something with WebSockets and Agones and they want to write that up, then they can do that and sort of let us know that it's there and we can link to it, right? If these are intended to be opinionated solutions, like that's a great place for it to be really obvious whose opinion it is, and like we can sort of link out to that. I think the one concern I have with putting it on the Agones site is it starts to look like it's like this is the endorsed solution, and might prevent people from like looking at other ways to do it or thinking that like that is the only way that it should be done. So if we put it on our website, we just need to make really clear, like, here are some ways people have done this. Like Dom said, these are examples. These are not like the solution, right? This is not the way to do it. This is a way someone has done it, right?
What about, I think a couple of communities use the -contrib repos, and you can have like this isn't officially supported, but contribution to the community. So it could be one of those things.
Mark loves making extra repos for things.
I do not. The mono repo is so much easier to organize.
We are continuously arguing on the docs going into their own repo. So I am personally a fan of repo organization. But the great thing is it's an open source project. So like if we all think that it's the way to go, we can overrule him.
Yeah, if somebody else wants to build the infrastructure, that is totally fine.
And I'm the GitHub admin, so like I have all the tools.
It's true. I'm literally
telling him one of these days I'm just gonna do it.
I'm literally trying to look up how we do solutions on like Google Cloud.
Well, I mean, that's what gRPC does, is there's like the ecosystem kind of repo. And I think that's what OpenMatch has also been talking about too, is like they've made that repo for, it's the way of saying like, this is a thing, it's not fully supported, but it's a thing that someone did and it works.
Yeah, they've got gRPC ecosystem.
I would say, April, how does that work in terms of like documentation, right? Like I understand like a contrib repo if somebody needs to like dump some code or some configs or that sort of thing. But like we want to link from our website to something, right? Would we link to a README in GitHub? Would we like put pages on the website? Like how does gRPC handle that?
From my experience,
gRPC, it just it lives in the repo and the website doesn't really point to it.
Okay.
gRPC docs, issues aside. But I do think like, the big thing is just setting that expectation of, I would just point to like the repo and be like, here's a place where these kind of things are held, use at your own risk. I don't think that we're there yet, but I know like with gRPC, we actually have a form process where if someone wants to be in that repo, they have to, which I mean, a pull request would do the same thing, but like
never escape.
We just like to make sure that you're not putting in something terribly malicious. But yeah.
That makes sense. I think to your point, Rob, I think whatever we do, it needs to be explicitly clear that it's coming from probably an external company or external user. It is not it's not official. It is an opinionated solution. And like we need to make sure it's that I think that makes 100% sense.
Right.
Yeah, that's kind of the default for
examples, right?
Yeah,
we have examples right now that are sort of project supported that like show a way to do something, right? And this is going to be something that is separate. It's kind of like an example, but not an example, right? And
to your point as well, like if a solution stops working or is no longer valid or something like that, like what do we do with it? And should the onus be on us? Is actually a really good question. And so maybe that's a good point to just say, yeah, if you want to do that, put it on your own website and we'll link to it.
Well,
right,
and that's
a lot of the examples are tested.
The criteria. Yeah.
Yep. That's fair. That is fair.
Is there value in adding more sample code for some of these common solutions? And do these third-party solutions exist that we can even link to?
We do have a third-party solution.
Build it and then expect other people to fill in the code. That's how it works, right?
That is literally what I do. I don't understand. I write stuff and then I go, Steven, can you do the JavaScript for me, please? Thank you. Yeah, we do have a third-party section in the website as well, like where we point to other people's projects. That's the thing. Okay, I mean, I'm happy to let it sit. I just wanted to bring it up as an idea.
I think it'd be really valuable. It's just like a question, like say this WebSocket one, like is there actually a solution that someone's prepared externally on WebSockets like, in existence, or is it just going to be like, are they waiting for a reference implementation first? And then we'll start to see the blog posts.
Well, yeah, because we could have a running list of like, these are the things we want. And once we tell people what we want, they'll totally just make it. That's how it works. I'm curious, like, you know, it sounds like, you know, maybe at least a couple of folks would be interested in kind of maybe working with me on our GitHub organization. We can create like a little working group. Our first working group, anybody interested? You don't have to all jump together right now. We can, yeah. But that, I do think, like, as the project has grown, like, this was always the thing of, like, there's nothing, it's a lot easier to start off when it's still small.
Yeah.
And to try to pull these things out into their own repo later.
One thing I do have, this was from the last meeting, we talked about pulling, like, for example, the site into its own like build Docker image and its own cloud build script. Then that means we could do like conditional testing. So like if your stuff doesn't touch the website, then like we don't run those tests, which is nice. And also lets us transfer over to the actual official like cloud build GitHub integration stuff, which we don't use right now because it wasn't around when we first did it. It's never been updated. And that could be a nice first step to getting that stuff into its own repo if we want to do that. But at least it then gets it separated, which is nice. There's a ticket. It's got like help wanted, good first issue, I think, on it, or at least help wanted. I can find it. So if people feel strongly that way, or
yeah, I'm kind of with April.
I ask you, but not to actually do it yet. So
I've seen very few PRs that like have to touch stuff in the website and the code at the same time. So I think that's a pretty clean split. We'd also talked potentially about SDKs and maybe move those around. I think that's a messier split, but the website seems like a sort of pretty clean thing to move out.
Yeah,
I figured it was a good starting point at least. And then we could do that split inside here and then take that split and then move into its own. Like we can do it in stages. Of course, I can't find the issue.
just a quick time check. We still have a lot to go through. Dom, you have a question you want to talk about?
Yeah. So one of the things I'm using at the minute is I'm heavily using player tracking, which is great. And as part of that, having my CCUs from a decent source would be quite nice. So I was thinking of putting something like, if there'd be any pushback of putting OpenTelemetry or Prometheus inside the sidecar, because it's not there at the moment, and exposing the CCUs per game server on that endpoint.
I don't know anything about how the metrics work, but the question I will ask, that is a vague giant line in the sand. Since we have that information at the game server level and we're pushing out metrics through the controller, could we capture those metrics there and push it out that way rather than adding an extra thing to the sidecar?
You probably could if that's how you do metrics currently. But then it's very hard to know. But yeah, I suppose my pushback on that is then you're duplicating all the metrics everywhere, right? You're just pushing it from the sidecar up to the controller to re-expose it.
Well, the controller's already watching for state changes on game servers anyway. And it's already cached. It's all in an in-memory cache, so it's not a huge amount extra. And we also already have all that machinery in place to watch for stuff and then push out things like what states are things, what counts things have. So anyway, it's an option. We could write it. Yes, I think the metrics are good. It's probably worth writing a design ticket and going backwards and forwards on actual implementation stuff.
I'll probably be doing that in the next couple of weeks, hopefully.
Sweet. That's really good.
So yeah, I'll start a ticket when I start trying to hook my graphs and alerts off that.
Yeah, no, I'm not sure exactly how OpenTelemetry works, but when you say put Prometheus in the sidecar, you're really talking about like exposing an endpoint for Prometheus to scrape, which is not like adding a huge new dependency to the sidecar, right? It's exposing the VARZ endpoint apparently. Streams the endpoint, right? So I think
there may be value in that too for like custom metrics down the line as well. So like there's probably a bunch of nuance to this.
Yeah. And the kind of related then is kind of is it going to be adopting OpenTelemetry? Is that the kind of route we'll be going down?
We had a thing about that. I think we were like eventually.
There was a ticket, I actually checked on this like a week ago because I saw that ticket and was like, oh, I wonder where OpenTelemetry is. I heard somebody on a podcast talking about it. And when I checked, it looks like they are still maybe just got to beta. Like they're not quite V1. And I think we were sort of waiting for them to hit V1 before we did the migration work.
Yeah, sounds sensible.
And I couldn't tell from their website what their anticipated date for V1 was. Yeah, so it wasn't clear how soon that was going to be.
It's not documented. I know there's been a couple of breaking changes recently, so I definitely don't think it's, at least on the metrics side, the tracing side seems fairly locked down.
Okay.
Yeah. Do you know where that ticket is? I felt like we had a ticket, but now I can't remember where I can't find it.
We did have a ticket.
I'll find the one for the site.
Yeah, we had a ticket about general how we can switch fast from Prometheus. I will find it. I hope.
1012 is the one that I was looking at. Where it says OpenTelemetry doesn't seem to be available yet, so we should use OpenCensus and Open Tracing for now. And I think rather than instrumenting with tracing, we were just like, since nobody actually like started working on that, and I think at this point I was kind of looking at it going, OpenTelemetry seems like it's getting close. We probably need to switch to that anyway. So like when we do that, we can also add tracing.
Sounds good.
Because right now we're using OpenCensus, and I think the roadmap for OpenCensus is OpenCensus won't exist at some point in the future once OpenTelemetry is V1, and people will have to migrate. Which also begs the question of whether what we have in OpenCensus does anything at all of what you're looking for metrics, right? Because like Mark was saying, like, you know, like the metric stuff, I think Tyrell is driving a lot of, and you know, making it work for himself the way he wanted metrics to work. And I don't think there were a lot of other people that had really strong opinions on metrics. And so if you have opinions or ideas, we'd love to hear those.
Is that somewhere in the project? I mean, in Agones project, yeah? That's the controller stuff. Yeah, cool. Yeah. Right. I can have a look at that when I jump on and look at doing the CCUs.
Yeah, probably definitely worth a design ticket to like do some pros and cons on approaches, and we can bounce it back and forth based on current and future needs. I think that makes a lot of sense. It sounds like good stuff.
And then I may as well just carry straight on around. Yeah, so the discussion around, I saw a discussion around resource-based APIs going forward. It seems as though, at least from the external viewpoint, is that's what Google do. And so I thought that maybe it should be something that the project adopts for any new APIs. And we had a bit of backwards and forwards around how that may look for player tracking, and if we wanted to do it for player tracking. I'm not sure quite how much internal change it would cause for tracking. But yeah, I think it would be a worthwhile thing to try and standardize on.
I think we added it to our.
Did we add it? I remember discussing it on the ticket that we would look at adopting it going forward.
Did we not? Ah, I thought we did.
There's a contribute. Maybe we should add this link to contributing, make it a standard.
Oh, we didn't actually do it. Okay. I think my general takeaway from that was there was some discussion around like some of the finer details of that.
Yeah.
That yes, it was a good idea, and it just requires someone to actually do the work.
Right. Cool. Sounds good to me.
The only thing about that is if we do the work, then we need to go back and fix all the SDKs and make sure that they still work. Which is the hard work. That being said, at some point we will go from alpha to beta and then beta to GA. So we have opportunity to break it along the way, or even within the alpha cycle and stuff. Of player tracking. Where's player tracking at? That is
alpha. Yeah.
Yep, that is a good question.
I was also going to ask how many of the SDKs have alpha support for player tracking? I know a fair number of them do, but I don't think
Rust,
they all do.
Right? C#, Unreal, Go, Rest, but default because
Node does.
I think Node as well. So,
okay, so maybe they pretty much all do. Okay.
But what was I going to say? I don't think that from the conversation we had, some of the gRPC things changed a little bit from memory. I think primarily most of the change was on the REST side, which is a lot easier. I think the Unreal will probably change the most there. I think there were some minor changes to the gRPC service naming, I think, from memory. But yes,
this kind of flows nicely into Steve's question next, which is where are we at? And I think the answer is we're in alpha. It sounds like we potentially have some API changes we want to make that we'll be breaking to do before we promote to beta. Are you kind of asking, Steve, like when we'll get to beta and GA? That's kind of what I was gathering from your question.
Yeah, pretty much. Just to see if there's any more changes required.
Yeah, so I've been thinking about this a bunch. Actually, thanks for bringing this up. One of the things I was going to try and start tackling in this sprint as well is to add some of the features that take advantage of player tracking to try and also get some more adoption. So allocation based on capacity and auto scaling based on capacity, because once those are in, then like people are actually going to want to use them, and which means we're going to find bugs and we're going to have to go back and fix them. So that was my thought. Sorry, go ahead, Tom.
That's interesting because I'm kind of doing allocation based on player tracking at the minute, but I just wrote my own thing because it's so tied to the game that I suppose it could be pulled out, but a lot of it's very game specific. So yeah, that's why I'm using player tracking to see like what game worlds are running and who's in them, and then to put people.
So what you're telling me is when I finally sit down and write the design ticket for how to do this, I will make sure to tag you so that you review the design ticket that it does the things that you need.
That's fine. Yeah.
To Mark's point though, like the goal of having it in alpha is for people to use it and us to make sure that it's good enough to promote, and we want to keep supporting it. And so really the feedback we want is like, yes, this is a feature that I really need. It works great the way it is. Like, we should promote it. I think the feedback that Dom was giving earlier was like, yes, it's a feature I need. It doesn't quite work the way I want. Like, let's fix it, right? And so to me, that signals that like we're sort of still in like the alpha phase. We should try to prove it out a little bit more before we promote to beta. And I think Mark's suggestion of like, let's build some more stuff that depends upon it and make sure there aren't other things we run into, because really that's when we figure out if the API works correctly or not. It's when we try to use it, right? And I think Dom's tried to use it and say like, hey, it doesn't work quite the way I would expect. Let's see if we can fix it. And the more people that do that, the more confidence we'll have in promoting it. I mean, that being said, we also don't want stuff to languish in alpha permanently, right? So we do want to have like a path for it to get promoted.
Yeah, there's actually some other things in beta that can probably get GA'd, I think.
Yeah, Puna has one of those on the list coming up.
What was I going to say? Do we need some sort of formal version for like, or some formal process to be like, at the end of every release, like during a community, maybe part of a community meeting, we go through whatever is in alpha, beta, and see if there's stuff that should be stabilized or something like that, so that we make sure that nothing languishes. Because it seems like right now it's sort of just like, if somebody goes and looks and does a check, then that's when it gets sort of graduated.
Well, perhaps of a kind of roadmap or a graduation process, something around that. Or are you saying just do it every month, just ad hoc? Say, are we ready yet? Are we ready yet?
Something like that. I don't know, between releases. I I'm not sure what the right solution there is. Or maybe this is fine. Like right now, because we have it listed and documented of what is in. Where is it? There we go. Where is even this
I just like the link in chat. So this is what I would say is like maybe it's just as simple as looking at feature stages during this meeting and saying like,
yeah,
let's look at feature stages, see the things that aren't listed as GA, and give like a quick, round the table of are people feeling like it's ready to be promoted, or people feeling like it needs more feedback, et cetera, and at least sort of touch base with each of the things that are on that list.
Yeah, like port allocation to multiple containers. That could probably go GA. It seems like no one's complaining about it. Or maybe, do we need to like file a bug and say like, is everyone happy for this to go GA? I don't know what the right answer is.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Like, I think if the consensus in this meeting is that it's not, then we maybe shouldn't file a bug. But if the consensus in the meeting is like, yeah, we think it's ready, then we should file a bug to get people's voices that can't make it, right?
Yeah.
But if people here are objecting, then it's probably not worth the extra process of like asking if other people also object, right? There's also a nice formatting issue at the bottom of that table we should fix.
Ooh, so there is.
So this kind of leads into the next thing on the agenda, which was Puna's question about multi-cluster allocation and changing to a stable version. So I don't know, should we move forward and talk about that next?
I can talk about it. So multi-cluster allocation been added for a while. It was changed to beta. The API servers for Agones allocator is stable on V1, and CRD that is used for multi-cluster allocation is also unstable. However, the documentation is still documented as a beta feature because we haven't received enough feedback. I see recently a lot of issues relatively was filed against that. And we tried to address some of them in the last release for 1.8. This release, there are a couple of more. One is fixed for supporting this reserved IP for issuing the certificate. And there's another one which Robbie also added to the document for timeout on the gRPC. And then if there's no more requests, then I think based on the usage, the feedback we get, we should decide to make it stable. Most of the issues came from Improbable company. I don't know if anybody from that company is on the call, but I would like to hear if there is somebody right now against basically moving it to stable or for moving it to stable. Or somebody has any usage for multi-cluster allocation.
I think I would have, so I used to work at Improbable, so know pretty much what they're doing with it. It seems though Adam raised a ticket around the timeout. I think from what I remember, can't really go into detail, but it seemed fine for what they were using it for. I think multi-cluster allocation in general will be good. And I think most people will be running multiple clusters based on geolocation. So I think it's definitely a use case that everyone will be wanting. So I think it'll get more usage, if anything, as people get more mature with their usage of Agones.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we should probably, I don't know why they haven't put out a pull request to fix it, but yeah, I think we try and get someone to fix the issue and then take it into GA.
I say it sounds like the path then is once you like, it sounds like no one's dissenting, so let's write a ticket and maybe wait like a week, and if everyone's like, this seems fine, then let's go ahead.
Okay, sounds good.
Yeah, I was also going to say, like, lots of other parts of Agones are in GA, and we still find little bugs and we fix them, right? So we shouldn't let the fact that we found a bug like block us from saying it's ready to graduate. Like, if we believe that it's stable and it's something we as a community are going to keep supporting and keep using, then that also, I think, argues for it being promoted to GA.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Robbie, I think you're the rest of the stuff.
Sure. I was just going through and trying to add some recent tickets to the agenda at the beginning to make sure that sort of things got surfaced that people have brought up recently. At least one of them, I asked somebody if they wanted to come to this meeting. I think the first one was filed by Nikhil, who's working with Puna and I at Google. And it's about installation, and in particular about do we want to refactor Helm to allow us to install sort of parts of Agones instead of the whole thing, right? And so in particular, he was working on just installing the allocator service and not installing the Agones controller or the ping service and sort of the other bits you get. The allocator service, of course, depends upon the CRDs. So you have this sort of dependency graph of like pretty much everything in Agones needs a CRDs, and then like the other pieces can largely be installed independently. And we have some flags to turn some of them on or off. And he was exploring a use case where we wanted to basically turn everything else off except for the allocator, which is not a use case that we've supported to date. And we had a little bit of discussion in the ticket about how we might be able to modify the existing Helm chart or create a new Helm chart, et cetera. So I wanted to sort of just put this out there so that if anybody else had similar use cases, they could chime in on the issue. Or if there were other parts of Agones that people thought would be useful to be able to install separately, that we could also chime in on the issue there. So not necessarily like want to go into too much detail about the issue here, but I did want to sort of put it out in front of people and see if this was something other people had run into, or if everybody is just sort of using the default Helm or YAML install, and this isn't something that would concern you no matter what solution gets taken for this issue.
So from my side, I'm using default YAML install and find it quite easy just to not install parts. However, one of the things when I think about modular installs, I always go back to Istio and think about how they were really modular at one point and then recombined. And using Istio with a combined Istio-D is way easier than using it the other way around. So if we do go modular, I would, I think adding lots of different smaller daemons can often get confusing.
Istio is using Helm templates, right? You still can deploy different components using Helm template, like we do for Citadel, as far as I know.
I think to your point, Dom, what you're probably trying to say is like by default, have it all work together. If you want to split it out, rather than be like, hey, make sure you grab these 7 different things and put them all in together to make it all work, right? Like by default, it all works. But yeah. So you can opt out of things where you don't have to opt into everything. If that makes sense.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. Like we don't want to force people to have to run 5 different installers to get the whole thing, right? I think that's what you're saying, Dom. It's like if Istio's installation method is like run these 8 different things and then you have Istio, like that sounds not very user friendly than just one run thing. And I think what we're exploring is a use case where we don't need everything, so we might as well turn off the stuff we don't need, and that would basically be an opt out of like I want to install it without these pieces, right? Would be sort of the way you express that through your Helm configuration is like Helm install -- skip this, whatever. Cool. So the other 2 issues that I linked here are very much related, and they're both about supporting game servers running in multiple namespaces. So by default, when you install Agones, you get name servers running in the default namespace. And you have to tweak a number of things if you want to have it manage game servers in other namespaces. And I think this has been a couple people, and people are looking for solutions to make this easier. So the most recent ticket, somebody was saying that their workflow is that they add a new person to their team, and that person gets a new namespace, and they want things to just work, right? And right now it doesn't, and that person gets frustrated, and they have to go back and realize what went wrong and go fix their Agones installation to manage this new namespace they created. And I think the first ticket was like, let's make it easier to tell Agones which namespaces are managed. And I think Alex, you went back and forth on that one with Robbie Haywood a little bit to try and figure out if there was a way to change Agones to make it more sort of friendly. And so I think two things have come out of this. I think one is there's always some tension here between security and ease of use, right? Like right now, our posture is a little bit more secure, which makes it a little bit less friendly to people. And we can decide if that's the right posture to have. But the second one is, I think this is really illustrating the fact that a lot of people are using more than one namespace or a non-default namespace for their game servers, which probably wasn't the case when the project was started, and it was much more of a like, let's get stuff up and running really quickly, and people just throw stuff in the default namespace because it's easy and you don't have to specify extra flags to kubectl. But as people sort of use things more for production and more seriously, I think the use of namespaces is going to be more and more common. So I think, again, this wasn't looking for like, let's design a solution in this meeting, but sort of get this out in front of people. Like, if you have use cases where you are in multiple namespaces or a non-default namespace, it would be great to chime in. If you have ideas of how to make this easier, it would be great for you to chime in. And if you think that our security versus ease of use posture is wrong, like, we'd love to hear that too. So
I was going to add a note to that. Would also love to know if you have different namespace needs for development versus production and what those are. I wonder if people are more inclined to use more namespaces in development because they might be sharing a cluster versus production, but I don't know. I have, again, like to Robbie's point, like that has different security versus ease of use needs for both.
My also addition, if we can have a feature stage, feature gate for this security, say more secure way, then it would be easier to turn off for some guys and turn on for some others, but I'm not sure if this is possible. It should be in template and in the code also.
Sounds like an installation option on the Helm template somehow, or as a feature gate or something. Is that what you were going to say, Robbie?
Yeah.
Well, that's what I was going to say. Like, it comes back to your question about like, if this is for non-production use and we're willing to have sort of a different security posture for non-production, we could make a flag on install that says like, hey, I want to install this development cluster, and I'm okay easing my security posture to make my life simpler. But when I go install my production cluster, I don't want to do that. And so that comes back to like, are people running things differently in the different clusters? Are people okay with having their configuration be different in production and non-production, or people want things to be consistent so things are tested the same way, right? So I think we sort of need to tease apart, how people want to use this and make sure we're solving it the right way.
Yeah, and there was a case that we can read secrets from every namespace by Agones controller. So that was the case. So any secret can be read.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I think, Alex, to the two tickets, one you're mentioning, and like Robbie's mentioned to both of them, I think one of them was about making security tighter, and the other one was about making the ease of use easier by making security less tight.
Yeah.
Does namespacing have an impact on security in Kubernetes?
Yes, it has an impact. I mean, it's not like hard multi-tenancy, but it does generally provide a separation of concerns. You can apply a lot of the role-based authentication at the namespace level. So, if you do things correctly, you can say this actor is allowed to access secrets in namespace A, but nowhere else, right? And so that's especially effective.
Role stuff rather than physical security of, because my only thinking was like, if you're on the node, you're on the node, right? You can get whatever you want.
Yes, right, and that's why we sort of tend to talk about it as like soft multi-tenancy, right? Because if you are on a node, there have been lots of sort of proof of concepts of breaking out of containers. If you can break out of containers, if you can get root on that node, you can then potentially inspect what the kubelet's doing or act as a kubelet and access things across namespaces. It's not trivial, and so if you are concerned about like your code doing the wrong thing, like you can use RBAC to enforce that your code doesn't accidentally reach across namespaces, but it's not a sufficient sort of sandbox to run untrusted code and assume that it can't break out, right? So you need another layer of security for that.
Cool, yeah.
But it's great for cases where you have like a bunch of developers at the same company who want to run stuff and not step on each other's toes, right? And I think that's what somebody expressed in the ticket was like, hey, we want to give each person their own little area to play with. We'll give them a namespace. Then we don't have to manage extra clusters or people. And they generally won't step on each other's toes, right? And so it works really well for those scenarios.
Yeah, we can see what each one's doing because it's like, oh, if you're running 10,000 game servers and it's in your namespace with your name on it, we're like, we know who created all those game servers.
Right. I mean, even if you were running like a production system with 2 games from the same company that were managed by the same team, like that would be reasonable to put in a cluster with 2 namespaces, because the people who have access to the cluster, you would want to have access to both anyway. And it might be less overhead and work for them if they're all in the same cluster, right? So I think there are lots of legitimate cases for using namespaces. But it's more of like a resource separation, but it's not like it's not a firm tenancy boundary. You can make it more firm by using things like taints and tolerations and preventing things from scheduling on the same nodes and that sort of stuff. If you're trying to really go down the multi-tenancy route. But even there, like there are a lot of people in the Kubernetes community that are trying to improve the multi-tenancy posture and realizing that it's not at a hard multi-tenancy level, right?
Yeah, I mean, I would even use taints and tolerances for it because I wouldn't want my game server on the same node as something else, right? I think that's the default way I would go.
Right.
But maybe not for security. That's what, yeah.
Yeah. Again, and you want to probably do that in production where you care more, but for development, maybe you care less about the overhead of tainting and tolerating things, right? Cool. That was the last 2 things I had on the agenda. Again, that was mostly to bring it up and get some initial thoughts and feedback, and also point people to the issues so we can kind of keep plugging away.
You timed it perfectly.
I did.
Oh, well done. Since we pretty much are at time, I would just say, we'll continue conversations in Slack and GitHub and everything else. Thanks everybody for joining and having such a great discussion, and then we'll see y'all again in September.
Yeah, see you. Thank you.
Cool. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.